Hey everybody, I'm Caitlin Martin. I chair the Kalamazoo Poetry Festival. I'm so glad you guys have been able to make it here today for the craft talk between Danez Smith, Patricia Smith, moderated by Denise Miller. Denise Miller is a professor, poet, and mixed media artist whose poetry has been published in The Offing, African American Review, Blackberry, a magazine, Crab Creek Review, and The Collapsar, among others. They were named a Willow Books Emerging Poet, an Aroho Waves Discussion Fellowship awardee, a finalist for the Barbara Dimming Money for Women Fund, and a Hedgebrook Fellow. Their full-length poetry collection titled Core was released by Willow Books in 2015 and has since been nominated for an American Book Award and a Pushcart Prize. Miller has been named a William Randolph Hearst Fellow at the American Antiquarian Society. Their chapbook, Ligatures, which was also adapted for the stage and produced in 2020, was published in 2016 by Rattle Press. Most recently, they have won the 2020 Sexton Prize for Poetry. They have been awarded a 2021 Story Knife residency and have also been awarded a 2021 Martha's Vineyard Institute of Creative Writing Fellowship. They are currently working on a full-length play and a novel. More of their work can be found at denisemiller.studio. Denise, you are one of the most generous people I have the luxury of knowing. For over 2 decades, you have helped cultivate spaces where poets can share our work and not be judged for what we bring. I have benefited from that tremendously, and I know I am not alone. Thank you so much for all you do, all you've done, and being able to join us for this conversation today.
So sorry. I think I alarmed everybody about whether or not I was ready. Caitlin, you didn't warn me. I started crying at your introduction, so I really, really appreciate you. So anyway, I'd love to get started. So I want to thank the Kalamazoo Poetry Festival for asking me to do this and giving me the opportunity to be on stage with 2 of the most amazing, transformative poets that I've known in my lifetime, and known, I mean, on the page, and I'm just getting to start to get to know them in person. And so before I get started, though, I'd be remiss if I didn't honor this time and this place. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with a quote from one of my favorite authors, James Baldwin. And he said, "The role of the artist is exactly the same as the role of the lover, to make you conscious of what you don't see." And because of that, I really want to think about today, where we are, where we seem to always be at in terms of the killings of Black and brown people at the hands of racism. I want to take a moment to just be silent. I would be remiss if I didn't do it on this stage with 2 revolutionary poets and one hoping to be revolutionary poet. And so if we could, let's just take a minute to just ponder, to think, to honor, and to give reverence to those that came before us and who left too soon. So I want to begin with, and I hold that reverence, of course, as always throughout. But I want to begin with reading the bios of both Patricia and Danez. And I'm really excited about reading these bios and getting into the conversation. I want to say first, they're not related. So we want to make sure we get that out of the way in case that becomes one of the questions that come up later. But I'm going to go ahead and read. Patricia Smith is the award-winning author of 8 critically acclaimed books of poetry, including Incendiary Art, Tri-Quarterly Books 2017, winner of the 2018 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award, the 2018 NAACP Image Award, and the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. It was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Should have been Jimmy Savannah, Coffee House Press, 2012. winner of the Lenore Marshall Prize from the Academy of American Poets, Blood Dazzler Coffee House Press, 2008, a National Book Award finalist, and Gotta Go, Gotta Flow, City Flies Press, 2015, a collaboration with award-winning Chicago photographer Michael Abramson. Her other books include the poetry volumes Tea House of the Almighty, Coffee House Press, 2006, Close to Death, Zolan Books, 1998, Big Towns, Big Tot, Zolan Books, 2002, Life According to Motown, Tia Chucha, 1991, The Children's Book, Janet and the Kings, Lee and Low, 2013, and The History of Africans in America, Mariner, 1999, a companion book to the award-winning PBS series. Her work has appeared in Poetry, The Paris Review, The Baffler, The Washington Post, The New York Times, Tin House, and in Best American Poetry, Best American Essays, and Best American Mystery Stories. She co-edited the Golden Shovel anthology, New Poems, honoring Gwendolyn Brooks, University of Arkansas Press, and edited the crime fiction anthology, Staten Island Noir, Akashic Books, 2012. And then Danez Smith. Danez Smith is a Black queer pause writer and performer from St. Paul, Minnesota. Danez is the author of Don't Call Us Dead, Grey Wolf Press, 2017, winner of the Forward Prize for Best Collection, the Midwest Booksellers Choice Award, and a finalist for the National Book Award. They also wrote Insert Boy, Yes, Yes Books, 2014, winner of the Kate Tufts Discovery Award and the Lambda Literary Award for Gay Poetry. They are the recipient of fellowships from the Poetry Foundation, the McKnight Foundation, the Montalvo Arts Center, Cave Canem, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Danez's work has been featured widely, appearing on platforms such as BuzzFeed, The New York Times, PBS NewsHour, Best American Poetry, Poetry Magazine, and on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Danez is a member of the Dark Noise Collective and is the co-host of VS with Franny Choi, a podcast sponsored by the Poetry Foundation and Post Loudness. Danez's third collection, Homie, was published by Grey Wolf in January 2020. Find more at www.danezsmithpoet.com. So as we jump in, I'm so excited again to be here, and I keep saying that, so I'm going to stop fanning out. I'm just going to be here with y'all. Hey, Patricia, good to see you again.
Hi.
Oh, so good to see you. Oh my gosh.
Hey,
okay.
Cassie. Hey.
Gotta breathe some. Okay. So I joked a little bit, but wasn't really joking about the relation, you two not being related. I've gotten asked that a few times from people when they knew that I was going to host this. But there is a relationship between you two, right? The poetry, one of the things that I was doing as I was making a list of what to ask you and what to talk about is how so much of what each of you writes in terms of theme and in terms of imagery weaves in and out of each other. I felt like I was writing in both of your books, and I'm a writer in books, but writing in the books, and I'm like bringing these connections together. And so I really want to just hear a little bit about, let's say, theme, right? Let's say kind of what the theme of what you all are working with. And I jotted down some ideas of theme that I saw, but I would love for y'all to speak more to it. The themes that I kind of saw arise in your work both were death, definitely water in the relationship to drowning, water in the relationship to baptism, water in the relationship to middle passage and Blackness and getting here, and where we go next. And so maybe we'll just kind of start with those ideas. Like, how do your themes emerge in your work? Do they emerge intentionally, or do they emerge out of the poems themselves?
Word. Well, maybe I'll speak first as the little homie in the situation. I also want to start off by saying, Denise, thank you for your energy, your introduction, your hair, your face, your energy today. Steve, thank you for your interpretation and allowing another level of access to this event. And you are also very cute today. And Patricia, 1,000 thank yous. I lay at your feet every day. So I think, yes, I think in terms of, I think it's a lot of things, right? Like, and I say this as somebody who, I think as writers, when we're getting started, one of the first things you do is try on different voices that you're so attracted to and that you find electric and alive. And, Patricia's voice was definitely one of those voices when I was trying to find my own, that I tried to walk a poem in her footsteps. and see what I could do. And I think, you know, there are the poets that we gratefully live in their shadow. And we try to cobble some of that shadow together into our own light. And Patricia is definitely one of those foundational poets for me who I'm always walking behind, walking alongside. And only, you know, I only say walking alongside because I think Patricia does that thing that good poets do, which is not keep she's not interested in hierarchy, right? She knows who her babies are, but she also I've seen her come to students as places of knowledge and resource too, right? She still reads, which you can't say for every poet, right? You know, some poets sort of lock themselves in an error or in their particular corner or don't read work, but I don't know, that's shaped me as a poet too, just seeing like how Patricia engages with me, with other poets my age, with other poets of different generations, not only as somebody that we look to, but what a grace to be looked at by your hero as a peer every once in a while, or just as another poet, and you're just like, what the fuck? But your question was about content. So that's just about me, I think, just like I get to live this life where you get to know your heroes, right? And I'm ever grateful for that. In terms of content, I think it's because I don't know if it's intentional, right? I don't know if I'm writing about the things I'm writing about because Patricia did, but maybe because I think just of who we are as artists, as Black folks, and as Black artists. You know, I think what I see in our work is that we both are interested in witnessing and writing down that witness, and a witnessing that expands its time, that goes across our entire lives in terms of our autobiographical work, but also across the long history and indeed into the future of our people, right? And I think Patricia, that we both do that for Black people. I think Patricia has done that so beautifully for Black people across genders. And I think that's actually a challenge to my own work, especially as my own relationship to gender has changed. I see how locked out of my work Black women and Black femininity was at a certain point, where I think I was trying to write for Black boys and Black masculinity in a way. And I think Patricia has done a really great job at writing for Black men and women, Black girls and boys, with such great magnitude and honor. And so I think that's it, right? Like, you know, like there is a particular charge. I don't think anybody has to be a Black poet beyond being Black and being a poet. But I think we both kind of take up the charge to not only take up a politics of Blackness in our work and a care for Black folks in our work, but also an attention to the Black image and our Black symbols, right? And so that's why you see water, right? That's why you see certain places, certain buildings. That's why there's an attention to the church, even if it's not a Christian work. I think it's fair to say that, especially American Blacks, we have moved through Christianity, right? And so we have taken up some of those symbols of the cross, of certain things that we can relate to biblicalness into our work. And I think they are indeed Black images at this point for us, right? And so part of being a Black poet for me was looking to folks like Patricia and like so many other folks. You know, for me, that was also Terrence Hayes. That was also Amiri Baraka. That was also Rita Dove, Lucille Clifton, so many folks, right? That made me unafraid to include my Blackness in my poems. And I think that does create just a common vocabulary of image and of symbol and of people and of history that you're pulling from. But then what I'm grateful for in that content is that all those heroes, right, all those poets then put forward like, okay, like it ain't enough just to like include the water. What are you going to do with it? Right. And so then comes that push to put your own stank on it. Right. We can all arrive at the chicken bone, but how are we going to address it differently? We can all arrive at the same point in history, but how are we going to trouble it? How are you literally going to trouble this water that's only for you? And so both in content and craft, right? I think like as a young poet, following Patricia, following her voice, right? Literally trying to mirror some of her poems. But if you're a poet that is worth your salt, and if your heroes are worth their salt, you know that imitation can't be the only place, right? And so then that launches me into my own questions that maybe are still continuing to play in this same pool of history that I feel at home amongst each other in. But yeah, then trying to define my own voice, my own perspective in terms of how we're speaking to that.
Hi Danez. You look so good today.
Hi, Patricia. I'm trying to balance this weird camera. Thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you both for that.
Hi, Steve. So having grown up when I was born the year that Emmett Till was murdered. And so I remember a lot of secrets, you know. I remember my mother being ashamed of where she came from, ashamed of down south. I remember the story of Emmett Till not being a lesson, but it turning into kind of a religion that, you know, this is what could happen to you. So you grew up with this fearful thing just hovering in the air. And so I was kind of cut off from my history in a way. And I think poetry to me at first was a way for me to construct my own history and to figure out why the church was so important and why I was being told by everybody in my family, you know, you live by the church. And I think the subject matter and why I am, it's really strange to be in spaces with Danez for me, because you know, we talk about different generations and talk about what we find in each other's work, but Danez was the first person. I mean, we're all charged with the telling of our life stories, you know, and if we don't tell them, we give somebody else permission to do that, you know, and we don't ever want to do that. And while you are introduced to poetry by getting up on stage and doing it, and there's a certain amount of play in that. There's a certain amount of strategy. There's all these things that, you know, competition and all bring. But at some point, you have to ask yourself, if there were no, if there wasn't a chance of being published and there wasn't an audience and there was a chance that nobody would hear your voice, would you still be writing? And outside of that realm we were traveling in, Danez was one of the first people that I knew for a fact that answer was yes, you know, because we are writing so much. We're writing to answer so many questions that that we have about ourselves. I don't feel like, you know, when I'm writing and I think the idea of the responsibility of writing, the many people that we either owed answers to or the people who were looking for answers, because truth has been in such short supply and you can't profess to tell the truth to others until you know where you yourself are rooted. And that's a dangerous journey. That's a dangerous place to write. And it took a long time to reach a point where I wasn't afraid to mine that territory. And I don't think, or I can't see that Danez has ever been afraid. You know,
child.
I know. I couldn't, you know, I didn't see that, you know. And so when you get to the generational hierarchy, you know, I felt that way about Gwendolyn Brooks, who I would see out and about in the neighborhood, who taught me not to look out over where I was for what I wanted, but to look at what was actually around me and know that that's where I came from. You know, the fact that where I was living, I was constantly looking out and said, I can't wait to get out, to get over here. When it's like skipping over what you think is a distasteful part of your life to get to where you actually belong. And I was taught by her that I was already where I belonged, and that's where my work was supposed to start. When I met Danez was just a kid.
Yeah.
You know, he was like 19 or something.
Yep.
And granted, what came before that, I didn't see. But what I initially saw was where I had prayed in this life that I had been when I was that age. Where I think I would have discovered, discovered my root that much sooner. I would have discovered the responsibility of poetry that much sooner. And so I learned so much from watching him negotiate the world, because there are still moments of doubt that I have. There are still places I feel like my poetry is not reaching. There's not enough time left in my life for me to write everything that I feel like I need to write. And so to see someone who so courageously and so brashly has said, I know how much you've tried to categorize me and how much you've tried to determine my place, but it is here and I will bellow it from the rafters, despite you, because of you, and despite you. And I just look at the different way that's reaching out into the world. Everybody that I know knows Danez. I mean, he has his poems have a way of living his life after he's left your presence. You can still, you can read the work, you can listen to the work, and you have to acknowledge who he is, the parts you like, the parts some people might not like. And I envy that voice. I envy that voice. And so in a way, I model some things that I do after who he is now, and who he was when I met him at 19, because I missed so much of that part of my life, and so it's a real revelation to see. And also a revelation when someone like him says that something that I said or wrote that they learned from, and I'm saying him like a crazy person. I'm gonna get it.
But see, this is very black. Okay, sorry. I also hear the echo. Maybe it's me. This is very black for me about gender. Like, I do go by they, them, but I do think, I don't know, you remind me of my mama. And like, my mama will be like, this is my gender neutral son, Danez Smith. And I get exactly what she's saying, because I think you've also, to me, that speaks to a gendered history. And I know I'm probably making a lot of trans allies and gender neutral allies mad right now, but I feel like you've known me across me's. And so I understand where that he comes from, because I know there's still a little bit of that 19-year-old, very much like big-headed, small-shouldered boy in what you see. And that nigga's still very much in me. And I appreciate that. And I think this is also about feedback, right? Like, I hear you talking about like what maybe like me and like we've given permission for you, but like we were getting that same thing for you. Like, we were getting this fearless agenda about what it meant to be a poet from you, that it didn't have to be pigeonholed into one corner. I think it was Robbie Q. Tefler who always describes like poetry as a nipple, and like, like you might just be one hair, right? When you're doing slam or something like that. But you really was the whole titty, and like from slam, like, to like being right, like going from like, in my mind, like when I first heard Patricia Smith, right, that name first came to me as like, Patricia Smith is the best slam poet in the world, right? And then eventually that was Patricia Smith is the best formalist that we have. And then it was Patricia Smith like just won the like mystery novel shit. So now that she's the best at that, and then like all these things you move, and maybe it's because of us. And like, it's just like, I think that's just how feedback happens. You inspire us and me to do everything. Cause why the fuck not? Why not try? Why not, use the tools that you have to build something that you have no clue how to build? Why not try it out? And so that type of, even if that fearlessness was something about like how we live that we got from you. We got similar instruction that you got from us that I got similar instructions from you about how to trouble, about how to build. Yeah, so I'm just grateful. I was crying for a little bit, but I'm just grateful that, you know, we can make this happen for each other. Okay. Ooh, Denise, ask us some questions.
I was thinking about so much. So I had a list of questions. I'm not going to throw all that form out. I'm going to throw out all that order and just see where we go. But one of the things that jumped out to me when I was reading both of your work, I had a discussion about the essay Killing Rage from Bell Hook's book. And I'm thinking about this quote from the book that talks about, and I'll just read it real quick because then I want to jump in to both of your pieces. But in the article, she quotes Toni Morrison, and she says, "Perhaps this is what Toni Morrison's character Joe Trace is talking about when he shares in that jazz the knowledge his play father, Mr. Frank, taught him. The secret of kindness from white people. They had to pity a thing before they could like it." And she says the presence of Black victimization is welcomed. But then she goes on to talk a little bit about the rage that comes with that. And she says a Black person unashamed of her rage, using it as a catalyst to develop critical consciousness, to come to full decolonized self-actualization, had no place in the real existing social structure. I felt like an exile. But that part where she talks about that rage raises consciousness. And what I hear you all saying so much is that both of you, when speaking the truth, which you do so well about Black people, individually and collectively, it's so interesting, especially I see it in Homie and Blood Dazzler. I see both that individual and that collective just coming over and over and over again. And Danez, when you wrote in Fall Poem, when you wrote, "No one wants to hear a poem about fall, much prefer the fallen body, something easy to mourn." It brought me right back to that quote. It brought me right back to that. Like, what place do people tend to give us as Black poets, and you all more specifically, to name how you write and who you write and what you write? And how does that sort of confinement feel? I know, Patricia, we talked about it a little yesterday. We talked about slam, and, you know, people are saying you're the best slam poet, you're the best this poet. You're the best, period, right? That quantification is all their choice. And so how does all that come up for you all? And that sort of naming outside the self. I mean, Thomas Jefferson started it with Notes on the State of Virginia when he said that, you know, Black people, even Phyllis Wheatley, is not a poet. So how does that naming get rewritten in your poetry, and what do you do with it?
Well, I guess, you know, at the beginning, I guess I asked for it. You know, I was not of a mind to become so much a poet as I was in search of different ways to tell stories. And I was in it originally for the pure entertainment of it. You know, my social circle was there. There was some place that I could be at 6 or 7 o'clock every Sunday night, and we kind of traveled the streets of Chicago together as a pack. You know, there were like 3 or 4 places every night to read poetry. And the idea that, and it wasn't, I mean, you would look out in the audience and there would be some guy who just got out of jail, and, you know, people who pumped gas and
Patricia, you're on mute.
Was I on mute from the very beginning?
No, last thing we heard is people that pumped gas.
Yeah. You know, secretaries, school teachers, you know, and all found it very important to be there in that space. And there was this tunnel of energy with us telling each other stories. You know, our stories. This happened to me today. And someone in the audience says, "Oh, well, this happened to me too. I just didn't know there was a way to say it." And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to grow this community of witnesses, you know. But in the meantime, when any amount of attention is paid to you, there are many people who are not going to rest until they categorize you somehow. They box you. It makes them feel safer. You know, either you're doing something that they've attempted to do and can't, or you're doing something that they've never seen done that way before or something. So it was one thing to say, "Oh, okay, so what you're doing is you're pushing buttons. You're a performance person." You know, you are about, you know, this far from being an actress, so that's not going to be poetry. Or you stand up and they say, oh, here comes a Black poem, whatever that may be, you know, and not saying that I can't read something about being in the Louvre in Paris and have that be a Black poem because I was there, excuse my language, because I was the one that was there, you know. So I found myself not having to redefine myself, but it's been quite amusing to watch other people redefine me. You know, at first I was really, I was invested in that. Oh, I have to become this other thing. And I have to prove to them that I can write, or prove to them that I can do more than perform, or prove that, you know, and that was too much energy on me. I need to just be me. All my energy needs to go into my writing, needs to go into my witnessing, you know. So while this other stuff is going on out there, I mean, I've had people tell me that I wasn't behaving like the poet. I guess I get a certain stage or a certain age or something, you're supposed to behave a certain way. You're supposed to get off of social media and be elusive and, you know, say, post one thing on social media every 5 years and people go, oh, she has spoken. You know, I mean, it was crazy. And the energy and the directives that I received from, let's say, Dark Noise, you know, let's say my chillin', let's say, you know, that you should be here. You shouldn't be wasting your time with other people who are younger than you. I mean, it's amazing how much energy people put into telling you who you are and telling you where you should be.
And isn't that the Black experience though? I mean, like, and then poet, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you know what? I think the difference is how much I allow that to direct me and to move me. It just doesn't anymore. I mean, I realize what I need from my poetry. I know who I'm writing for, and I know who I get my energy from. So if that means that a group of kids have a bake sale and decide that they want to bring you in and they got $15 and I want to do that, I don't want to hear a bunch of people say, well, you're wasting your time doing that kind of work, you know, because they don't know what I want my work to be and where I want it to go and who I want to leave with it, you know? So yeah, the naming thing, I think what was most important when I stopped worrying about naming myself and found it amusing instead of despairing when I watched other people work to name me.
That is, yeah. I think in terms of being named as a poet, word to all that. I think the thing about really when it comes, like, I think the way you exit that is just knowing not who's naming you, but right, like the thing about audience and who you're talking to, that's about, like, to me, like who you give permission to name you as a poet, right? And I think that took a long time for me to get to too. I think the naming thing came for me, especially like I do recognize that I think I did a certain amount of like performing, at least in terms of like publishing and page wise, to sort of like be like, I am more than, you know, the spoken word background that I was, that I never want to run from, but it did feel like a pigeonhole at one point in time. And it wasn't even that I was ashamed of it, but I was like sick of motherfuckers being like, oh, well, you read well. And I was like, no, I write better than you too. And I just really wanted them to recognize that, right? Like, get this page, honey, you know, like it's read well, but it reads better than yours too. You know? And so I did some of that, but I think for me, it was just this question of like the white gaze, you know, and like, and not the white gaze, who I also have problems with, you know, but just they're looking, right? And I was like, what do I do? I think especially after the publication of my second book, which I think also came like a little bit after, like, I think I just had like a rise in like, just like notoriety. And I was very uncomfortable with my rise in notoriety because it was also very much linked to elegies and sort of poems with a protest energy that I was writing, you know, and I was getting booked more acclaim, more of this, more that, the book on the fancy press. And that is directly linked to me writing out of real rage and anger and grief. And what I had to realize was like, we live in like an Afro-pessimist world or country, right? Afro-pessimism being, for if anybody doesn't know, just like a framework that looks at society and knows that society is dependent upon anti-Black violence, and just like the degradation and oppression of Black people, right? And the same is true for everything, right? Like I was sort of writing from this real place of grief. I was finding, I think, authentic connections to audience where that grief was recognized and familiar. But then there was this sort of white gaze and white like salivation over that work, right? This thing of like, please, please, please give us the grief, give us the trauma. Do you have poems about the most recently dead boy? And that really sent me away from my own work and my mission. And I really had to think about, why am I writing? And I don't think that changed, but I did have to, like, I think like Patricia said, more sharply define who I was writing for, and recognize that part of the long journey, and I think this is the uncomfortable part for me, is that unless I am going to be the only person handing out my books and making sure that only certain niggas get them, there are always going to be people who will misinterpret or misuse my work, looking at it, engaging with it, buying it, right? And that is a relationship that I think I had the trouble in terms of naming. And so that's why, like with Homie, I was very intentional about naming who that book was for, and like who the words in that book was for, right? A book that in which I'm like using nigga more than your favorite rapper. And so I wanted to like really define who this energy is towards. And like, I really wanted white readers to feel the distance of their gaze with a collection like that, right? Where I think like in Don't Call Us Dead, I was talking to them, right? Like, you know, oftentimes when I say like reader and I'm leaning in on that book, I'm acknowledging I know a white person paid $16 for this. And so let me talk to you now. And so that question of naming, right? At like with Homie, with Don't Call Us Dead, I feel like I gave them too much power, but I also feel like there was an intention for that. And then with Homie, and I think with the rest of my work, I'm interested in really marking and claiming the groups and the individuals that my work is for. Because those are the folks that I'm giving permission to give me a name, right? And you can name me all the other shit. I'll be the Black poet. I'll be the gay poet. I'll be the pos poet. It's all in my bio. Shit, you know? And I love being those things because I'm of those peoples, right? I think the Black and queer and HIV positive canons that I come from, I love them. They're writers that I love. And so part of me even naming those in my bio is to say, like, this is who I proudly come from. But I'm not interested in any of the other namings, right? All I care about is that you maybe talk about my work right. And sometimes I also know that you're never going to get it right. And so then that just like really focuses like who I'm listening to, who I'm speaking towards, what I define as a poetry community for myself, because I don't think that my poetry community does not include anybody who writes poetry, because I don't know all them niggas. Right? But like, who do I feel like I walk alongside in what I think poetry does in the world? And that helps me do what I want to do. Or else I think and I did feel this in my like mid 20s, you can get drowned in it, you know? You can get so drowned in it. And it wasn't helping the poems come. So I had to find better questions.
Patricia, go ahead.
I think you can argue all day about who the work is for. But I think one of the things, and I know this is true for Danez too, you don't give them any opportunity to argue with the work. Okay, you can't mess with the work, you know. And I think that's where a lot of people's frustration comes from, because if I name Danez the gay poet, and then I can look at his grief poetry and say, well, he's trying a new thing here. I just don't know, you know. And so the conversation's always going to be buzzing. It's always going to be buzzing. But I don't think there has ever been an instance where someone sat down and said, this work is lacking. for any of Danez's work or anything, So in that case, I'm doing what I came to do. You're talking about it. And if that's all I can ask for at some point, that's all I get.
Period.
I'm shaking my head so much when I'm reading y'all's work, because the next thing that I remember writing, first in one of the books when I was reading your work, Patricia, and I wrote, "Enter us." Like, there are so many places in both of your work that Black people, like, you bring all of us into the room, and all of my past and all of my all of the moments that I know, the switch off of the off the bush. When you start with when you talk about in Luther B. Rides Out the Storm, the language that you use now in the loop and reloop of dog thought. There's got to be some good living at the end of this, maybe a pork chop with some religion still hanging from it. And I think every Sunday when the preacher came by and started to eat, like, all of these places, you have us enter. And so beyond the layers of writing that needs to, call whiteness into, show that lens I was talking about with Baldwin, that lens of like what you don't see. Besides that, that's always in there because you're naming the truth in both of your work. Where do you see us in it? Like, how do you enter us? Like, those moments that just, it seems like, roll off your tongue in each of your pieces, the way you begin. I could go through lines, but I know you're going to read tonight. But yeah, I feel like it's so accessible to us, the us that is Black people, the us that is queer Danez. Even though, I was born in this female body, my pronouns are they, them. And I know you write a lot about boy, but I still see us in it. So
yeah. And I think that particular, I think it's interesting, right? Moving towards they themness. And I think this is the interesting part about like having like a career, is that I am a different person now than who wrote those first two books, and who was still in boyness. And that's a country I moved through, right? But that was also the language I'd known. And even if you look at those poems, you can see a little femme motherfucker trying to break out of this like masculine frame, right? And so I was actually thinking, what will it mean? I was actually reading an essay that a writer had wrote about myself and Ricky Laurentis and our earlier works. And, Ricky, she or they, I think I'll say they, but I believe they might also use she pronouns at this point. It's like living their best life, right? And I've also sort of moved further away from maybe a strict masculine frame or identity, or that was never strictly masculine, but now is more abundantly feminine. And so it'd be interesting, right, to like read like how like these poets of Black boyness, like moved into like, different spaces, and like, how poets who maybe started in Black girlness, right, shifted there. I'm interested in in 20 years from now, the poetics of the Black non-binary, and how that differs for all of us who have like maybe started out from different positions and then moved to this neutral place, which is not neutral at all, right, but very charged. Sort of to this question of like we, right? I saw there was a question in the audience about libraries and how we label ourselves, like, right, how do we feel about libraries labeling each other's like, sections like Black authors, LGBT authors. I'll start there, right? I think that's necessary work, right? Because at one point, like, I actually don't care how I'm categorized in the library. What I care about is that I'm found there. And I care about how my readers find me, right? So like, it's important. I hope my book is in two sections. I hope it's in the poetry section flat out. And I hope that actually three, and I hope it's in both those Black and LGBT sections, right? Because I hope that that's how I found books, right? I went to the Black section at the little library because I wanted to find Black authors. I was interested in the stories of me and my people, right? I went to the gay section once I was brave enough to head over there because I needed to hear those stories. And I was appreciative that I was appreciative for both ways that it was categorized, right? I was appreciative for both being able to go directly to the source and say, this is what I'm looking for. And thank you for also littering gay people throughout the regular fiction section when I was trying to hide. Or when I wasn't able to be standing in front of that labeled space as boldly. So I think both of those are necessary. And I think that is like sort of the we work, right? There are times in which I is I, there's time which I is not I. And also, I don't want what I'm saying right now to be confused for saying that like we represent the monolith of our people at any given point, right? Because I think that is an injustice upon any writer to say that what you said is supposed to represent your entire fucking diaspora. How idiotic. And how idiotic that folks put that on us, right? And we've all been there. Are you saying that all Black people think this? No, because I don't know all them motherfuckers. Excuse my language, but don't. But I think there is something powerful that I know Black folks understand in the we, right? I always talk to my students sometimes about how in Black work, there often is a implied we folded behind that I, right? It's deep. There's a sense of history and belonging. It's why we can read each other and each other's poems and stories. And I think that goes a little deeper than just I relate, but it also is this sense of community or understanding. It's why we grieve from nations and states away at the death of a young Black person or any Black person, right? There is something that ties us. Race is a construct, but within that construct, we have learned to hold each other, and that is very real and deep and heartfelt. And so, what it calls for me is I don't know. I don't know when I call it. I also know I'm very intentional about when I try to use like a we type pronoun, because I know how dangerous that can be, especially when I am the one with the publication and the readership that, has been asked to speak, right? Or that I've charged myself to speak right now. So I think it's a very dangerous tool, but I think the power in it can be to really grab hold of a greater intimacy with your reader, right? I hate this idea of universality. I don't like the idea. And, sometimes I'm writing a poem to humans, anybody who this might reach. But there are other times where I want to shout a little louder and say, you little Black motherfucker, I'm talking to you. I want to shake your shoulders and say that you're loved, right? I need to shake your shoulders right now and say that you're alive and that your anger is valid and that your joy should be protected and that your mama should have loved you better. And that, and all those things, I want to grab you and say that, well, whoever that reader might be. And to me, that is one of the many responsibilities of the author, to make it clear, right? Not just in the line of in the level of the line of the work, but sometimes to make it clear who this is for. And so that's where that we comes in, right? There are things that, and I can remember those moments, in my early reading life. I can remember reading The Skin I'm In and here and like watching that dark-skinned Black girl's journey and like knowing what it felt like to feel Black and ugly and young. And realizing that there was somebody out there that thought you were beautiful and maybe more. I can remember reading Man Child in the Promised Land, like my daddy had me read, feeling like somebody was really talking to me, right? I can remember discovering Baldwin, right? I can remember the first time in a poem, the first time somebody laid Langston Hughes in front of me, and it wasn't no Robert Frost, and it wasn't no Shel Silverstein with his silly shit. And I was like, this nigga knows something, right? Like, reading My Life Was No Crystal Stair and really feeling like I was sitting there talking to my mama. And so that moved me. And I can remember those times where I felt called into a we, into a us. And so part of my responsibility is to offer that same thing to my readers, right? I know who's reading my work, right? And at a certain point, I do start thinking about the little 14-year-old, 15-year-old Black queers who might be picking up my work, whose teachers might be sneaking into these books. I care about them deeply. And yeah, at some point I start to lean into that and I start to use that we. At some point I am thinking about how my mama, my grandmama, my auntie gonna read this poem. And I want them to know a little bit louder at that point, I'm here, we here, right? And this poem is for you. And so don't hesitate to claim this art that I'm pushing out into the world as your own, because especially at that point, it's not for me. The selfish part is the drafting, is the working on it. At that point, I am trying to give a gift to somebody else. And so sometimes, some people are bad at taking gifts. And so sometimes you have to say it a little louder that this is for you.
So I love that. So Patricia, I'm thinking about when you said initially, I remember a lot of secrets, like you talked about your life beginning, the day that Emmett Till was murdered. And I think about your book, your collection, Incendiary Art, begins and ends with Emmett Till in a way. And so I'm wondering, who are you? It sounds weird. I don't want to say who are you writing for, but I want to say who shows up in your poems. Who are you speaking to? Who are those poems speaking to, and why and when? If that makes sense.
I'm gonna back up.
Yeah, do
a tiny bit, and I think I'm kind of amazed when I listen to Danez and think about the difference that generations make. You know, when I was young, my mother's greatest fear is that I wouldn't be white enough. You know, I was always too dark. I mean, she would reach over while we were watching television and just hold my nose during the duration of a television program. No explanation, just your nose is too broad. You're never going to make it with that nose or that skin or whatever. And so that was part of when I said that my history was cut off from me. It wasn't just who my people were or the people who were really down south. It was the whole agenda changed for me. First generation up north. And, you know, my mother, when I first started working, my mother would just call me and say things like, are you treating those white people right? You know, like they gave you that job, they can take it away, you know, and what do you have on today? And what do you know, I mean, it was just constantly this barrage of stuff. And so I think the we in a lot of my work is not only me getting to the point where I could celebrate what was lost. Not at the point that I could celebrate what was lost, but also that idea of just kind of trying to reconstruct what I should have been celebrating all that time, you know. And I don't know Danez's mama. You know, I know of her. I've seen very joyful pictures of her. I know that she's proud of Danez. I am an only child, and I went through my whole career as a poet without that. With my mother saying, "Are you still doing that stuff? You still doing that mess?" You know. So where I needed to be building and where I needed to feel that I was supported. I mean, the first place where you feel supported, I didn't have that. So the poetry community served a greater, they provided a greater service to me than I think they'll ever know, you know, in terms of formulating families. So, and also what I said about Gwendolyn Brooks teaching me to look at where I was instead of where I thought I wanted to be. And I don't know, I'd be interested, Danez, but when I first started traveling, doing poetry, I would do my poems of home, my we poems in we places. You know, like I'd be with the blacks. You listen to a black comedian can come out and say, "Bid whisk," and everybody will start laughing.
Yep.
There doesn't even have to be a joke. It's that familiarity. Mm-hmm. You know, it's that family thing. It's like this thing we got that you don't have. Mm-hmm. You know, and so
I definitely keep the black set for
right. And when you're talking about something like Katrina, which was such a human disaster. And oh yeah, I'm tired of seeing those women get lifted up in them baskets, and I'm tired of hearing, you know, and you want to recognize that you, the witness, and the person being lifted in that basket during Katrina are one and the same, you know. And so that maintaining that putting it in to remind people that there isn't there's a problem with being introduced as a poet sometimes. I am poet, your audience. I'm about to partake this particular wisdom that you are not privy to. And that's ridiculous. You know, anybody in any audience can pick up a pen and go home and write a poem. You know, and so I think we owe it to ourselves to stay connected, stay attached to those stories. There are stories. Once you start to lose that, you certainly have become that other, and you might as might as well let somebody categorize you.
Mm.
I mean, you go through the whole mix, you know, Black poet, Black female poet, slam poet, performance poet, disaster poet. You know, I mean, I swear, after I wrote Blood Dazzler and there was the disaster in Haiti, someone asked me, well, where are your Haiti poems? Like, you know, and yes, like Danez says, where's your latest Black boy? That's the old Black boy dead.
Mm-hmm.
Where's your new Black boy dead? You know, as a Black boy killed yesterday, you got that poem yet? You know, and so it comforts and gives them some element of control to believe that that's the purpose that we serve.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, nobody ever says, you know, can you read that poem about being in the Louvre, or can you read that, because that doesn't fit there. You know, that's me dabbling in them, and they don't want to hear that. You know, so I think the we is a reminder to me, and also if you've ever walked into a classroom that looks so familiar, where all the little Black boys are sitting in the back in the shadows and the girls are up front and they don't want to be here because we don't know nothing about no damn poet, you know. And the first thing you want to do is say, I came from here. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not doing anything that you can't do. And so that little flash of recognition you have in the language and stuff, it's like an eye wink, like, you know, we're telling these stories to each other. Mm-hmm. We really don't need that. Yeah, we don't really need that.
Because I feel like can somebody mute Patricia? I think. Okay, there we go. So I think the thing, right, two is the operative word there, right? Because I think this is the key in the Black set, right? Is that there's a difference between talking about Black people and talking to Black people, right? And I know it's like, for me, I know in touring, I stopped. If I saw a certain amount of Black faces in the crowd, I would not, or if it was just a Black event, I'm not doing my poem, Dear White America. We know everything that poem is about. We've grieved it. You know, we've lived it. And so I don't need to yell at white people in the room full of Black people, right? I know that it'll get the Black people going. I know that we feel it, right? It's sermon. We can do it. And it's not saying that when I'm talking to Black people, I can't talk about real shit or hard stuff. But I don't need to talk about Black people in front of Black people. I have the opportunity now to communicate, right? And so how does that difference come into the work? And so I think that's the thing about a we, right? I know I have poems where I am addressing Blackness, or maybe Black experience, which feels like talking about Blackness, right? Which I can do in different rooms, which definitely has an agenda, right? That has an agenda of stop killing us, right? Of like, just treat us right, or go back to whatever home planet y'all come from. Like, you know, whatever the mission is, right? I'm trying to when I'm talking about Black people, there's typically something about a negotiation happening there, right? Or a demand, let's say, right? I am fighting for something when I'm talking about Black people, because about Black people means that I'm in a room where the depths and the wonder and the magnitude of my Blackness is not an understood familiarity. But when I'm talking to Black people, right, it's like Patricia said, I can just show up and say bidwiz. I don't have to have a stanza about what bidwiz is. You know, we can just start in the middle of the game. I don't have to explain. We already know. And so then the agenda, I don't have to argue. Ain't no need to say Black Lives Matter in a room full of Black people. Nigga, we here. Right? You matter. You know, we've already gained entry. And so what other conversation can we have? And I think that is the conversation more and more in my own work. I'm interested in my questions for we. I'm interested in moving towards what conversations can I have amongst my people and not about my people, right? What can I leave down, and where can I go deeper, because I'm already within the familiar. And so I don't have to map out how to get here. We're already here. And so now let me go deeper. Now let me build some sounder argument. Now let me think about what is possible to say within the room that is not possible to say about the room, right? So those are, I think, the difference. So like even just that 2 and 4, I want to get us to the 2. And I think that's where the we is at. It's when you're 2, folks.
I see in the chat, somebody asked, how do you create spaces for joy despite feeling pain? And I think that as I was reading, again, coming back to Blood Dazzler, there's so much of that in there. And I wanted to flip to some pages. but I don't want to waste that time. I want to hear from you, Patricia, because I think that really comes up in your work a lot. There's this, for me, when I see your work, I see the way that joy shows up is by talking about the things like how many church hats someone has on, and like in the midst of all of this heaviness, there's this joy of who we are. And so, will you speak to that a little bit more, if you'd like?
I'm thinking to something that Danez said about Homie, about making it clear who Homie was for. And it's funny that when you write or joy, or there's some element of joy in a work, it's as if you are doing something extraordinary, as if no joy exists. That we have pulled up from the depths and we're done talking about death, and we want to make sure you remember joy. If joy did not exist alongside, death and grief, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have made it this far. So I talk a lot. Last couple of workshops that I did, I was talking about remembering that in the darkest place, if you look, joy is there. Talking about clawing for beauty in some place where there is not supposed to be beauty. Beauty's there. We're just not used to looking for it, or we are used to succumbing to, the old woe is me. I'm just going to be swallowed and surrounded by all this darkness, and I'm just going to live it until something, religion mostly, pulls me out of it. But I think that, look at the last few years we've had. If there was no joy, we wouldn't have survived it. We wouldn't have survived it. So in those moments, the overarching thing is, okay, Hurricane Katrina, humanitarian disaster. Black folks will be Black folks. We're going to laugh. We're going to find something. We're going to see, somebody with their skirt hiked up to their waist going through the water trying to get home, in high heels. It just, there's the key in that. And actually with Incendiary, when I finished it, I gave it to some people and they said, there's no light in here. There's no relief. And I thought sometimes we make it too easy to turn away from the work. If we had said, where's the poem with hope? Where's the, sometimes people only need to see that one poem with hope to give them permission to turn away from the rest of the work, or not to enter it fully. So it's something that when we think about the feeling we want the reader to walk away with, or we want the audience member to walk away with, we have to balance that. We don't want people looping nooses around their neck at the end of a reading, but we don't want to give you that total out. That path that you can walk and say, well, that was educational. No, it wasn't educational. It should have broken you. It's broken so many other people. So the joy, I think it's necessary. I think sometimes it is difficult to find. I think we've had to sort of find a spot for it within ourselves, no matter, because we don't know what the next thing is that we're going to go through. I can't believe how terrible the world is now. I can't believe that Black people's lives are so insanely devalued, where it's really, it's an act of courage to go out and be yourself in the open air. There are so many people out to say your life means nothing, and where is laughter in that? Sometimes in the middle of it, you have to see something and just go, the insanity of this, I have to smile. I have to smile. I have to laugh. It's and it's been so long. think this isn't something that just happened, and it's like getting, I always think about going into a barbershop or a neighborhood gathering place and talking, and you're laughing when you leave, and the world is exactly the same, and I think that's something that we have that so many people don't. So many people don't. I've seen people try to anger me, hiss, invectives as I pass by, things like, and they don't know why it doesn't break me. It doesn't break me because I'm part of a community that if it hasn't been broken by now, it's not going to happen.
I think what you're saying is so true, and names just where we are right now. The idea even that people often think that as Black writers or artists or cultural producers that we're always writing out of pain. And more often than not, it's because they see what's been done to us over and over and over again, and all they can see is pain. But that doesn't mean that that's what we're writing out of all the time. And I love that you say you can leave a place and be laughing even while while we always know what's happening out there. We always know how to read the room. And so I think that's really, really well said. I'm wondering a couple of things, because I'm looking at the time here and I want to make sure that we get in what you're doing now. So I guess I want to ask 3 questions, and I know they might seem a little light compared to what we've been talking about, but I want to know what your go-to poem is. Like when you walk into a space and you don't know, like with the poem you need to do, right? I have a go-to poem that I call the ancestors in. If they show up, I'm so happy. It's my go-to poem, especially when I'm nervous. But so what's your go-to poem? One question. What's your poem that I said it when I wrote this question before. I was thinking, what poem of yours is your I? Because I keep playing with how, Patricia, you separated the I of Katrina from Katrina in so many ways. And the I became this consumptive thing that cleans things out, So what is that poem of yours that just lays bare space for things to be planted anew, right? The fire in the forest. So what's your go-to poem? What's your I poem? And then what are you writing now?
Stab at this. I think my go-to poem, and I think for me the framing is like a go-to poem is like you're walking into a room of like middle schoolers or high schoolers and you need them to like you within the next 5 minutes. You're right. Because that is the toughest audience, right? Like second hour, I don't give a fuck. My first hour teacher just yelled at me. I think it would be Dinosaurs in the Hood, or my poem.
That's my go-to poem too.
What a coincidence. What a coincidence. I mean, I think it does all the things, right? I think like slam poems, like for what they're worth, they do all the things, they're like perfect in length. They require a volta, which means that you have to like at some point change up the feeling. And that pulls people in. It's loud. It's funny. I cuss. It's built after a Terrence Hayes poem, so you can't go bad with that. And yeah, I think that's like my go-to poem. And I think it does what I think a poem should do. Which is invite in trouble, right? I think and it's sneaky like a lot of slam poems are, right? Like it starts off very funny and it's often a poem that like I see people start crying in the middle of. And I think it should do that. Right? Like I get to like have your soul, crush it a little bit, build it back up. I think that's like, what a good poem should do. So that's my go-to. My I poem, I don't know. I don't know if there's a poem like I'm trying to think about like what lays it bare. Maybe this poem called Waiting for You to Die So I Can Be Myself, because I think it is maybe one of the most, I think it's such a complicated poem. It took me forever to write. So I think it's also a poem that just the process of it, maybe not the final product, but what I know went into the making of that poem took me so long and took me so much poeting to do. And so I think I really had to lay myself bare there, but also I had to say things that I both agreed and didn't agree with. I had to like let go of my like literal I in order to say what I felt. I had to explain this to my family the other day. I was like, I don't actually want y'all niggas dead. But I had to allow that self to go there in order to get the emotional truth of it right. And so that was super powerful for me, that laid it bare. And then the last one was, what was the last one?
What are you writing now?
What am I writing now? Nothing.
Yeah.
No, I'm writing, I'm like slowly but surely working on, I won't call it a memoir. I'm calling it personal essay. I think that's more true to what it is. Writing a play that is loosely based on the lives of Prince, Marvin Gaye, and Luther Vandross, now reborn as like three queer best friends, just like living their little summer. And I'm writing poems. They're happening sometimes, just loosies. And I took on this stupid challenge that I'm actually trying to keep up with, of writing a high bun every day for the whole year. And I've been keeping up. I don't know.
Okay.
I was feeling fresh and free, was on new antidepressants at the start of the year and said, I'm going to do this. Love those antidepressants, by the way. But I'm like 10 days behind right now, so I need to catch up. But that's fine, because sometimes I just write 10 poems in a day. And and then so it'll be fine. But I think what I want to do with the high bun, and I know it sounds like very marketable, because all the poets right now are doing like the I wrote these poems for a year and then released it right thing. But I don't want to keep them high bun. I think what I'm going to do is get to the whole year, chop it up, and just make some language. There's language in there that I'm very excited about, but I don't know if I'm going to stay true to the form. And that's what I'm writing right now. And tweets.
So we lost Patricia for a second, and I'm just gonna ask you a couple more things, and then when Patricia jumps on, we'll let her take it away. Oh, she's back. Oh, good. Okay, perfect timing.
Anyway.
No, I'm glad you're back. I was about to call you on the phone and say, just get
sorry. It's just like I went blank. I was like, no. Okay. I'm gonna say that, and it's so hard going into a school, and when I look at my work, I can never find anything that's like 5th grade friendly. Middle school, it depends a lot on what middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And lately I'm gonna say that I start a lot of readings with a poem called "Building Nicole's Mama."
Yeah.
And it's not particularly safe. Actually, I start all my readings by playing "Dinosaurs in the Hood" by Danez, and then I start reading. That is a perfect. It does the work. It's not a safe poem in a lot of ways, but it's in a neighborhood. It starts with a group of kids. It talks about the concerns that kids have now that we didn't have when we were that age. It talks about possible loss and all that. And I talk to them about the poem being the reason that I keep writing, because I know there's somebody in, kicking it up in the middle of that auditorium who will chase you to your car when you're leaving and say, won't pay any attention or seem to be paying any attention at all, but will chase you to your car and say, oh, I like that line, or I like it when you said this, or whatever. And so, I talk about broadening the community of witnesses. It starts there, The I poem. For me, I guess the hardest poem for me to get done was when my father died. I was looking to write the definitive "My Father is Dead" poem, and I was looking for too much. I was afraid to say in a poem. Poetry has such power for me. I was afraid to say in a poem that he was gone, because if I said it, then there was no chance of magic happening. So then I realized that so many of those type of poems give the power to the loss and not to the life. And so I decided I would write a poem about a time that we spent together and make the death a minor character in the poem, as opposed to letting it drive the poem. And it was a poem about making cornbread in the kitchen with my dad. And that for me, when I do it, it kind of, it reminds me of how powerful poetry is, but it also reminds me to keep my mind on celebration as much as I can. And what you're doing, Danez, I missed everything about what you're doing.
Very briefly, I'll say it for you.
Okay.
Memoir, play that you would love. It's about a young queer group of friends that's based off Prince, Marvin Gaye, and Luther Vandross. And what's the last one? And the last one is I've been writing high bun all year, or high bun every day. And so I'm not going to keep them in the high bun form, but I think I'm going to I like the language that's happening. So I'm just going to like take these 365 high bun and then see what poems I can make.
Use that as a jumping off point.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. Just one question. So how far along are you with the memoir and the play?
Play is like, I want to say about halfway through a draft. They got their trouble and they need to, now solve it. And the memoir is still early. I'm taking a little retreat, self-made retreat to try to get some good pages done on it. I just got to sit in a place that's not my house and cry through these first 2 essays.
Yeah, that's right. Open the window and bawl out the window a little bit. Yep, I know. Wow, I can't wait for that. It's gonna be great.
Mm-hmm.
I finished a poetry book a year or so ago. Didn't want it to be published in 2020 because of the election. I didn't know if we were going to be like rioting in the streets or not. And then 2021, I know. And so it's, I think, the beginning of 2022. So that's kind of in the transom, although I'm back into it because I have more time. So now I'm kind of looking at it again. And I have been taking a group of fiction classes, which has been a lot of fun. I realized that a thing that's going on with the pandemic is I started to look and see how much stuff was actually available online. There's some wonderful places. So I had started writing a novel and decided that I wanted to take fiction classes so I can be around people who were writing novels and sort of soak that up. And so I'm doing that. And then I what I said to you last night, Denise, about writer's block, that you should always switch and do something else. So I finished 2 children's books. I'm sending those out, and I'm writing kind of 2 kind of novels. I'm trying to do a YA novel too. The YA novel, I just remembered, I thought of when a long time ago when Walter Scott was murdered by the police, and every time you called up something about Walter Scott, the video of him being shot in the back would start to autoplay. I mean, you actually had to stop it to keep it from playing. And I thought about a young girl whose brother had been lost, and he became a meme or something, and her trying to work through that loss with her brother's death being so public. So that's the other thing. So I'm trying to do fiction. It's a lot of fun, and I think poetry is the perfect training ground for fiction. Absolutely perfect, because it solidifies your voice, and you don't have to take the 10 steps to writing a novel, or 10, I mean, once you've got that voice and you know where it's emitting from, fiction seems easy so far, but we shall see. I have a collaboration with a photographer, a book of poems, a book of photographs that he took in Ghana of different women with different hairstyles, and so I wrote a crown for that book, and that'll be out in May. So I'm really excited about collaborations. Tyamba Jess and Juan Felipe Herrera, trying to think of who else is. I think Kamiko Khan, I'm pretty sure. We did a recording with a jazz group in Fresno called The Poets Are Gathering. And we're having a thing on the 20th to sort of let everybody know that that's out there, and call up all the people who are working with musicians and all that, and see if we can get something else started. I love seeing poets just fly.
Is that thing on the 20th of it? Do we get to? I mean, can we watch it? Or
it is. Yes, I will. I don't know where it is. It is being held at Northwestern University. So
okay.
Do The Poets Are Gathering, and Northwestern University. You should be able to find. I don't have a link to it yet.
Okay.
I'm glad y'all are doing stuff with music. I feel like, I don't know, I just missed that. That was, I don't know, like, I think we both got started, and maybe you too, Denise. I got started on mics. And so some, like, I don't know, some of the first poems I ever did were behind niggas, in front of niggas with drums and saxophone.
Oh yeah. Exactly. And it's a strange thing. In Chicago, there was one place, there was a place, it still is, the Lizard Lounge, where you do your feature and the band's there. And the one thing you have to be careful of, like this band in Fresno, it's if they had rehearsed with us already. They know how to listen for the rises and falls in your voice, and they listen to the emotional nuances, and they pull back just when they should. The problem with doing it with a band you've never worked with before is you're coming to this quiet part and they're going, da, 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 and you don't know what to do, But I think
it's a particular band. It's a particular kind of band.
Yeah. And they have to have a respect for the word. They have to have heard poems before. They have to, But yeah, there's nothing like it when it clicks. Nothing like it when it works.
Amen.
So we're almost done. And for anybody, and I'm sure that nobody in the audience is in this category, but for people who may not come to the reading tonight.
Oh, everybody's coming.
Exactly. But just in case, would it be, how do you all feel about reading a poem to close us out?
Ciao.
All right.
I'll read one. Yeah, I got them up here.
Patricia, sure. I was gonna say, Patricia says you got them all memorized anyway, so.
I was going, I said, Danez has this social media presence, constant. He writes a book every 2 weeks. Gets up on stage, does 85% of his poems by memory, and I'm just like, I don't know. And I've tried to get your secret.
Well, my secret is memorization. You be like, okay, so I wrote this poem, but it's actually a triple sestina with a tonka in the middle. And then if you look down the left column, it's the Declaration of Independence.
Or like Tyemba. If you cross the street and lift one leg.
Right. Now crumble this poem up and put it between your legs for 2 days, and when you pull it out, it'll look just like a butterfly and fly away. I'll read a quick one off the top of my head. Okay. Some I won't read tonight. This is At the Down Low House Party. At the Down Low House Party, don't expect no nigga to dance. Here we drink hen, hold the wall, graze an elbow, and pray it lasts forever. Everybody want to touch a nigga, but don't. They say, or we say, what's good? Meaning I could love you until my jaw is but memory. We say, yo, meaning let my body be the falcon's talon and your body be the soft innards of goats. But we mostly say nothing. Just sip some good brown, trying to get drunk with permission. And sometime between here and being straight again, some sweet-boned, glittering boy shows up, starts voguing and shit. His sharp hips pierce our desire, make our mouths water, and we call him faggot, meaning bravery. We call him faggot, meaning often I've dreamed of you, flesh damp and confused for mine. We say faggot, meaning hail the queen, hail the queen. We call him faggot, meaning I've waited ages to dance with you.
Thank you so much. See, nobody's gonna miss it. Nobody's gonna miss tonight. Patricia, do you want to read anything, or do you have any parting brilliance as always?
I have a little tiny poem.
Oh, love it.
Little tiny poem called Sacrifice. And it's got a couple of little notes before it. The first one is a UPI headline, or the beginning of a story. 28 Chilean women stripped naked in the middle of a busy road in Santiago, Chile, to pay homage to poet Pablo Neruda. And then a line from Neruda: naked, you are as simple as one of your hands. Flustered without license or sanction, the women clawed at whispered cotton and lopsided seam, pushed irritants to their ankles, and stood upright for whole seconds, just long enough for nipples to pimple in soft wind. Behind them, a home that once held his pens, his grimace acknowledging a tumbled phrase, earthquakes that grew pliant in him, and now 28 quick asses framed in the window. Much too rushed for structure, the photographer did what he could to stun the slow chaos. Heads were twisted, eyes in blink, pubic hair indistinct and shadowed. As sirens wailed, the women hurried into their clothes, blouses with nervy stink circles, skirts accordioned in haste. Their names were nothing, and they were rootless in their wandering away. There was no sense to their sacrifice until the night came and the poet's slow, remembering hands returned for their songs.
Nigga. Just a quick
Sorry,
little,
just a small poem, just a little poem, right? Oh,
I can't memorize it.
you don't need to. You don't need to.
It's gonna be fun tonight.
It's gonna be so much fun. So I remember before, Patricia, when you swore earlier, you said, I think you said, excuse my language. No excusing the language. Just opening up to the language and being so excited to hear you all tonight and being so thankful. I used to have this little plaque above the door at this poetry show I used to host, and it said, "All poetry is prayer. Thank you for praying with us." And I appreciate the prayers you brought for us today. I appreciate the space that you hold in your books, on the page, in your hearts, on the stage, for all of us to be welcomed in whatever ways that we find ourselves there. And I look really forward to tonight. I thank the Kalamazoo Poetry Festival for having me. I thank Patricia and Danez for making space for me and letting me be with you and be in conversation with you.
We're gonna get your phone number. Don't worry.
Let me give it to you. No, I'm not gonna put it in the whole chat right now. But I'll get you for sure. And don't forget tonight, I'm just gonna pull up so I don't get the time wrong because I'm so excited.
At 6, right?
6 o'clock. Yep. I think. Let me put my glasses on. Like I can't. We talked about this earlier. Yes, 6 to 7:30 tonight. There are so many wonderful workshops today that you definitely want to check out at the Kalamazoo Poetry Festival page. And do not miss tonight, 6 to 7:30, Danez Smith and Patricia Smith. And thank you all again.
The Smiths.
The Smiths. The Smiths.
Bye, everybody. Thank you again, Denise.
Thank you.
See you later.
I'll see you in a little bit. I'll go for a bike ride real quick, but I'll see you.
Okay.
All right.